Oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is happening. There is a new virus out there that has a 45% to 75% mortality rate. This thing makes C19, the old pandemic, look like a walk in the park. You know, they say it is spread through bats and through old date juice, and it originates in India, on the west side of India and the east side of a city that is within India. And the people that have gotten it, most of them have passed away. But I found something peculiar when I researched this online. I found out that prior to them talking about it just recently, and in July 2025, when it was sparking back up in India, there were actually documents on it from before that time. Now, these documents were actually from the Centers for Disease Control inside of America. The CDC, we all know what that is, especially if you're an expat abroad, you pretty much know what the CDC is. They are the organization that is in charge of pandemics, so to speak. They're the ones that gear up for these things. And I find it peculiar when I see that they have these documents that are already talking about awareness levels prior to this thing even hitting mainstream. Now, this isn't like a new virus like the pandemic C19 COVID-19 was. This thing has actually existed and has been around since at least the 1980s, so they've known about it, similar to other diseases and other viruses. But the fact that the mortality rate is so high should alarm you. Now, this is obviously not fear-mongering, but if you are someone that has an immunocompromised system, or maybe you have high blood pressure, diabetes, or you're an elder, then you do want to pay attention to this, because that is the population of the world that is going to be most impacted if this thing cannot be contained. But back to this document, because I did find it so weird when I read it. Now, I don't remember the date of the document, but it was from years ago, and it said, this is what you do if Nipah virus turns into a pandemic. This is how much of the world would be depopulated. This is how much of society would not be able to survive this if it went into a full-fledged pandemic. And I'm like, well, why would you make documents like this telling people or to your colleagues or whoever you're speaking to that they could potentially not survive, if they think it's 40% of the world, 30% of the world being knocked out or anything like that, unalived, or losing their lives to this virus that comes from bats, from old date juice allegedly. So you're supposed to wash and clean your veggies and your fruits like you should be doing already, but also pay attention when you are an expat out getting local juices at the vendor, okay? But why would they say that in the document unless they're kind of toying with the idea that they could push this a little bit further? I think they have tried to do pandemics after COVID-19, but they didn't pop off the way that they really want them to. There's a lot of things they tried to do on the continent of Africa, but they just don't spread, especially amongst melanated people. Melanin is one of those super powers, and they find this in India as well, where if you are melanated, then you're going to be able to withstand a lot of these issues that these viruses come with, okay? But I want you to remember something about the pandemic time. The markets were crashing right after the pandemic. The pandemic happened, and after that, gold shot up. The pandemic happened, and the entire world was closed. In fact, some countries are still trying to stabilize after all of that. Which brings me to this frame of mind. What if this Nipah thing doesn't just stop in India? Because so far they'd say it's contained, but Thailand, even Australia, I believe Taiwan as well, China, they're already at their airports preparing hyper screening. So I don't know if they're taking people's temperatures, because the symptoms are like a fever, like it starts out like a flu, a runny nose, maybe you have a cough, maybe you have a fever, you have flu-like shivers, symptoms like that. But then for whatever reason with Nipah, if it's bad enough and if your body is immunocompromised, remember, a weakness in your immune system, if there's some kind of pre-conditioned issue, a comorbidity that you have, if you're on certain medications that can suppress your immune system, in those people and like very young children, it can produce encephalitis. And encephalitis is actually the inflammation of the brain. Now you may be like, wow, how do you know all these things? As a teenager, I worked in a neuroscience unit where I would treat people that had encephalitis. Your girl has always been about her expertise, okay? So at a very young age, I was working in a very specialized area of Nationwide Children's Hospital, but it reminded me of the cases of encephalitis, which is swelling on the brain, that we would see back then, seizing, seizures, seeing patients who had that and thinking, oh gosh, if this thing really pops off like that across the globe, that would be like the actual pandemic. Because COVID, arguably, especially with the way that we believe and the way that we are, it seemed like more of a cold. It seemed like more of a, oh, you maybe had a little case of pneumonia. Oh, you maybe had this case, and they're just naming it COVID-19. But this Nipah thing, these patients have had seizures, have had encephalitis, and passed away within literal days to weeks in India. So they want to contain this thing. Who knows if it's actually contained? Who knows if it's some kind of biochemical weapon that they've engineered? Who knows what this is? But the main thing is for you to be under Psalms 91, which is the power and the wing and the authority of the Most High for healing. But with that faith and with you speaking the word, you also have to put some action. So you should be having ginger tea. You should be having echinacea tea. You should be having like a turmeric honey antibiotic that you take daily. You need to be healthy. You need to be not obese. You need to be paying attention to stress levels, where you live, and all of those things. Because as an expat, or as somebody who wants to be an expat, you're definitely going to also have to think about, okay, if another lockdown situation were to occur, what nations would I enjoy being locked down in? Now, I was locked down in Tanzania in 2020, and it was perfectly fine because it was the only country aside from Madagascar on planet Earth operating like normal, okay? It was such a time to be alive. I just look back at that time like it was so fabulous. And the reason that it was so fabulous is because nobody was standing 6 feet apart everywhere you went. There were buses going by, there were, fruit stands and veggies, and everybody was in very close proximity to each other. And that's another one of the reasons why I'm like, if this was an actual pandemic, something that's really real, everybody would be sick in this country because everybody is so close together, touching all the foods together and things like that. So COVID-19, I think, was practice. That was the practice arena to see if the world would comply. And about 99% of the world did comply, except for the late, may he rest in peace, John Pembe Magufuli, who was the president of Tanzania at that time, and then the Malagasy president of Madagascar, who has just actually been ousted from his country due to a coup attempt that actually went through, and it actually followed like a democratic coup process. So it was like a legal coup, okay? But I wanted to give that backstory because these symptoms, if you see these, this isn't like COVID, like it was cough and, that's it. And somebody's like, oh, I passed out. People in China with hazmat suits just passed. This is different. And again, it's not time to panic, but it is time to prepare. Go to the store, get some vitamin C, get some zinc for your whole family. Kind of pre-lock down yourself. Don't have too many people at your house. Don't meet with too many people, especially if they have traveled in these areas like India, like Asia, where it's being like kind of put right now, or where it is in higher numbers right now, because it spreads through human bodily fluid contact. So if somebody sneezes on you, those are droplets. You could get it like that. Maybe if somebody coughs and they have those droplets in their cough, or like if you're shaking somebody's hand and they just like touch something on themselves or something like that. And be prepared. Speak the word of Yah that no sickness can come across your dwelling. Again, if you're not quoting your scriptures daily, if your prayer life is a little bit slack and you don't really know how to pray in the spirit to bring authority to situations, moves like this as an expat are totally dependent on the value of currency that you have within the Holy Spirit, the set apart spirit. Do you have authority into the spirit to declare what shall be or to rebuke what shall not be? That's the time that we're in now, because it may look like we're going into a time that was darker than 2020. But let faith guide you, but put obedience and action with it. You can't just read the word and not speak it. You can't just read it and not live it. You can't just be lazy. You have to use your brain and act on the wisdom that you receive from the Most High Yah. Because these times, it seems like it's just gonna get crazier and crazier. Anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Shalom, shalom.